today we will talk about zero-day threats, and so the term zero-day refers to a wide and variegated topic. So it opens the door to several different discussions depending on who you're talking to. So in this session, we will approach the argument with a focus mainly on operational implication. So from the perspective of a SOC, a security operation team that have the main task to prevent, detect, and respond to zero-day attacks. So I organized the presentation in three main parts. We will start by introducing the zero-day threats landscape, so give an overall view of what zero-day means, what a zero-day attack is. Then we will focus a little bit more on what can we do to prevent and detect this kind of attacks. And we will conclude it with a practical example that is also very recent because it happened in last month. And in the case of the example of an active exploitation of multiple zero-day Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities. So before starting, just well, a couple of words on myself. Miguel already introduced me, so I will not take a lot of time on this. So I'm working for UNICC in the Common Security Operations Center, and for those of you who does know UNICC as an office here in Valencia. And we provide ICT services to the UN family. With me, we have Amedeo Cioffi, who is the head of cybersecurity operation in UNICC. So, and he helped me in preparing this material. So I also take the opportunity to thank you now. So let's jump in directly into our topic. So what is zero-day? What does zero-day mean? Zero-day attacks are attacks that exploit vulnerability that have yet to be publicly disclosed at the time of the attack, and they are extremely common. So they pose an always increasing risk for company and organization. This is just to give you a couple of numbers that I was able to find. Like according to WatchGuard, we can see that over 50% of malicious files contain zero-day malware. Where zero-day malware is a malware that contains a zero-day exploit. We will talk about it in a few minutes. And in this other report from Ponemon Institute, we can see that in 2019, around 80% of successful data breaches were a result of zero-day attacks. So they are definitely an important part of of the cybersecurity landscape. And one thing that I would like to remark is that when we are talking about the risk for companies or organizations to suffer a cybersecurity attack, not only zero-day, but in general, a cybersecurity attack, usually we tend to think as first thing to the monetary loss that derive from such attacks, or the loss of proprietary intellectual property. But there is also another very important aspect. There is the loss of reputation that is coming from suffering a cyber attack, and it can be extremely damaging for the company organization. Think about an IT company, a company that is providing security services and is suffering a cybersecurity attack. So this is also, there is a significant damage because the reputation that this organization, that this company has with its customer is also affected. So this is an important part. And so when we talk about more specifically of zero-day attacks, so zero-day attacks usually starts with a specific target in mind, which could be government entities, large business and organization, software with large user base, which, for example, Zoom, that in the last year and really increased its user base. Also hardware, including the Internet of Things devices, and the firmware, political targets, and R&D industry. Why this? Because, of course, let's say that the majority of this point of these targets are the ones that usually have at least should be like a better security hygiene in place. So patching management, maybe security teams dedicated to monitor and protect the infrastructure. And so that's why the threat actors need specifically to use what I call the zero-day vulnerability to increase the possibility of successful attack. This does not mean that we as individuals are not affected by this kind of attack. Because what it happens is that, let's say, the average person can end up being a collateral damage, or basically used as a tool in a bigger scheme. Think about users that get infected on their personal laptop, and that are becoming part of a botnet that is then used for a bigger attack. And that's why the market for zero-day exploit is it's very wide and variegated, and in particular we can divide it in three areas. So, which are the black market. That is where where the criminals are moving. So it's where there is the traffic of zero-day vulnerability and exploited for malicious intent. In the white market is where we have IT vendors, we have security researchers, and in general is related to defensive purposes. And then there is a gray market, which is mostly related to cyber warfare topics. And speaking about this, this is Google Project Zero, which is a very nice and interesting source of information, and we can include it in the white market area. And so Google Project Zero are a team of security researchers in Google that are dedicated to study zero-day vulnerability, and they make available this spreadsheet that track the cases of zero-day exploit used in the wild, detected in the wild, meaning that these vulnerabilities that are in this Excel are were used in real attacks against users. And also, apart from the spreadsheet, the website is interesting because it also contains detailed technical analysis on the root cause of most of the publisher vulnerabilities. So it's quite interesting to have to refer to. Okay, so now before going further into our discussion, let's stop for a moment and let's set a common ground on the terminology used in relation to zero-day threat, because terms like exploit, vulnerability, attacks are often confused, and even though they are strictly related terms, they are not interchangeable. Okay, so let's just dedicate few seconds to clarify this. So a vulnerability is a flaw or weakness in a system design, implementation, or operation that could be exploited to violate the system's security policy. And a zero-day vulnerability are vulnerabilities for which no patch or fix have been publicly released. A zero-day exploit, instead, is a piece of code that takes advantage of a zero-day vulnerability. And a zero-day attack is the actual action of using a zero-day exploit in order to compromise the targeted system. So, so if you, so we can consider that vulnerability essentially they come from a bug. However, they are bug essentially in the software. No, so it's important, however, to remark that not all bugs are vulnerabilities, and not all vulnerabilities can be usefully exploited. And also, let's say, different vulnerabilities give different possibilities to the attacker. So depending on the vulnerability, it can allow, let's say, to have a privilege, to escalate privilege, or to gain remote code execution. So what happened in reality is that threat actors usually combine more exploits to achieve their final goal. And if we see, let's say, classic attack timeline, we can see how all these pieces come together. So in a certain moment, a vulnerability is introduced in a software as a result of a bug, which could be programming mistake or memory mismanagement. Then it can happen so that, let's say, in the underground community, this vulnerability is discovered, and working exploit is developed, and this exploit is used against to conduct a stealth attack against selected targets. At a certain moment, the vulnerability will be discovered by the vendor, which will publish it, release the patch, and ideally all the vulnerable target will be patched. And so let's say that this time, that here I call it windows of exposure, which is the window of exposure of vulnerability, it can be very large. I mean, we talk about also years. Okay, that it can last for years. And one interesting thing that I would also like to note is that the part before the vulnerability is publicly disclosed is called the zero-day attack. However, when the vulnerability is disclosed, this is not means that the attacks are stopping, but in reality, what it happens is that we see an increase of the attack related to these vulnerabilities. And while in the beginning, when the vulnerability is still unknown, there are more targeted attacks. When the vulnerability is disclosed, we usually see an increase in automated tool probing on the network to try to find vulnerable host. So okay, so what can we do to protect us against the zero-day attacks? I mean, what can we do to protect against something that by definition is unknown? The good news is that there are several things that we can do both in the prevention part to minimize the risk to be affected by a zero-day attack, and also in the detection phase. So realize that we are suffering an attack before it, let's say, too late. It's before it reaches a bigger security incident. So in the part of prevention, the prevention begins from the software development. So from what the software is created. Okay, so follow secure software life cycle development, reduce the possibility to introduce vulnerability that can be later on exploited. Also, the defense in-depth approach, least privilege access. Defense in-depth means to use different technologies and different methodologies to protect your infrastructure. So let's say we can have a firewall at the perimeters and the antivirus, and then we can have other tools. To give like an analogy, think about like a building, okay, where there is a doorman in. I think there is something in the chat. Oh, okay. So think about, for example, in a building when there is in the entrance there is like a doorman. Okay, so just watch the visitor that are coming in and out, and let them pass. Then the visitor reach your door of your house. There is another, let's say, another defense. Maybe you have a surveillance system installed. Okay, so there are different things that are all, let's say, for the same purpose. And let's say the point of the defense in that approach is that we reduce the probability to have to suffer the attack, because we say that maybe if one technical control is failing, there are others that possibly will catch up the attack. And also least privilege access is also in the same, let's say, it's related to this. So by giving let's say your user the access only to what they are supposed to do, we also reduce the possible the attack surface that if this user is compromised. Apart from that, other things that we can do into the prevention part is regular patching, vulnerability management program, penetration testing, bounty program, also educate employees and users to apply good security habits. So one of the main vectors to compromise enterprise infrastructure is through the user. So through phishing emails, for example, of if the user click a malicious link and things like that. So it's important to educate your people to be vigilant and let's say to avoid this to be infected or to be victim of a phishing attack. Also, cyber threat intel program, threat and feeds are also important, because can give you a view on what is happening, let's say, around you, maybe in your industry, if there are some specific threat actor that are pointing your industry and so on. Also sharing indicators of compromise and useful information that can be valuable for you to assess and to put the right defenses in place in your infrastructure. From the detection, also, I mean, from detection, also we can do something. I mean, for zero-day attacks, let's say the traditional antivirus or technology that are based on signature-based detection are quite unsuccessful, but we have luckily we have, let's say, new methodologies that can give us a good help in this. So I'm thinking about next generation antivirus and endpoint detection and response systems, deception techniques like honeypots, honeynet. So in maybe you are familiar with a honeypot is. So essentially, honeypot is a machine, a server, a, a target that is not actively used in our network. So is there just to attract the possible attacker. So if we notice any interaction with the honeypot, we can collect. First, we have clue that someone is trying to attack us, and also we can collect additional intelligence and information on what they are trying to do. So honeypot can be a single machine deployed in your network, but we could deploy, let's say, what they are called honeynet. So having a subnet maybe that is not supposed to be used in your network with the. And if we see traffic and we see activity in there, something strange is happening. Could be also we could also create an user account, a privileged user account, disabled, and leave it there. That is not supposed to be used by no one. So if we see something is someone is trying to use that account, we have a clue that they are trying, most probably they are trying to compromise it. So we have someone that is trying to attack us. Apart from that, also we can rely on what they are called user and entity behavior analytics, and also network traffic analysis. Let me just talk about this about those one together, because essentially they are based on the same basic idea. So even though we cannot identify with a signature let's say unexploited malicious exploit, we still can detect if something is not going right in our infrastructure. We could be maybe a user that is starting to access machines or resources that is not he or she is not supposed to access, or we notice that a lot of failure login and then a successful one from a strange location. In terms of traffic, of network traffic, let's say the network traffic analysis tools usually they are either focused on anomaly-based detection or behavior-based. So, as the words say, like anomaly-based is spotting something that is not normal in the network, while behavior-based they are usually built what is let's say usual behavior on a network, so to be able to catch when something is out of the ordinary. So in this part, so it's let's say that's a new area, like machine learning and artificial intelligence are really valuable for security professional, because of course from a human from a human being it's difficult, let's say, to notice on especially in a bigger time frame to notice if something is anomalous. But this is where a machine can really help us. And so let's say that in this sense, these instruments, user entity behavior analytics and network traffic analysis, they help us to let's say give us some hints and reduce let's say what is the noise that could be complicated for a person to deal with. And also another thing that is quite useful is the proactive threat hunting. So basically assume that your network is compromised, and so going and proactively investigate for sign of compromise. So there are several techniques to do threat hunting, and it can be really valuable. Okay, so now I don't know. I'm not seeing the chat, so let me see. Is there any chance? One moment. Okay. Okay, hi Gabriella. Is there any chance that the attackers detect that it is a honeypot or net and not a useful network? Okay, maybe let's say the question later on. Okay, I will continue with the presentation. Okay, so let's say that after this very quick overview, I would like to give you some practical example that is from last month. Is when Microsoft releases several security updates for Microsoft Exchange Server that was addressing a known vulnerability that were being used in ongoing attacks. For those of you who are following some security blogs or LinkedIn feed and something like that, most probably have heard about this, because it was quite a relevant and important case. So what happened is that there were some vulnerabilities affecting the Exchange server on premises, more specifically the version 2013, 2016, and 2019. Exchange Online was not affected, and this vulnerability are being a part of the attack chain. I will just give you some more details in a moment. Yes. Hello. I don't know. I heard the. Okay. So I will. So this vulnerability were used together to first to gain a initial foothold, and so to for example to access email account, then to exfiltrate data, move laterally in a VPN environment, install malware, and gain some persistence in the VPN networks. So if we see, let's say, the timeline that is related to this example, we see that it's basically what very similar to what I showed you before. That's the general timeline, and it's interesting that the first attack were detected. Maybe let me point this. No. 1 second. Okay.
Gabriella, maybe you can try just to disconnect the sharing of the screen and connect it again, because some people apparently have lost connectivity.
Yes. Okay. How is now? It's good now?
No, it's not sharing anything on my case. Some people can see, some others can't. It's quite weird. Let's see, I'm going to change your role and get you back again and see if that works. Okay, try again.
I can see your screen now, Gabriel.
Perfect. Yeah, that's true. If someone has a problem, F5 solves it.
I think we can't hear you at the moment, Gabriella.
Hello?
We can
Now we
hear
can.
you. Yeah, perfect. And we can see. So you can continue now.
Okay. So sorry for this. I don't know if it's my laptop or the platform. Anyway, so I was showing this so the basic timeline of this study case. So where we see basically that it reflects what was shown you in earlier slide for the general attack timeline. So while the vulnerability has been publicly disclosed in the beginning of March, there have been identified attacks as early in early January. And also, what we can see now is that when a vulnerability was becoming to be known by the underground community and eventually being publicly released, we also see an increase in mass scan in automatically trying to scanning the network in search for a vulnerable server. And we can see that so after the vulnerability is disclosed, we can see also an increase that according to SS Security, at least 10 advanced persistent threats, cybercrime and espionage group have been exploiting these vulnerabilities. And 10 days later, the vulnerability was made public and the patch was released. There were still a lot of possible targets, and this is still ongoing. I mean, and it will not end until your server is the servers are patched. Okay. I'm just checking the chat from time to time just to to realize if there is some other issue. Okay, so this is, let's say, basically the when of this attack. When we see the how it was developed, so what has been observed is that the attacks use vulnerability unfolded in three phases. So there was an initial access, maybe exploiting, for example, one of the vulnerability. I will give you some other details on the specific vulnerability in a moment. So after an initial access, there could be this either with stolen credential or exploitation of one of the vulnerability. The attackers were leveraging other vulnerability to deploy web shell on the compromised servers. Web shell is essentially an interface that allows the attacker to execute commands on the server, on the victim device, and essentially is a code that is dropped on the server, and the attacker can interact via a web browser, and can so take control of the server. So after successfully deploy a web shell, there are additional post-exploitation activities. So use like to exfiltrate, to lateral movements, to try to reach targets in the same network. In some cases, there were ransomware deployment and so on. So this is high level. So how do they do it? They mainly leverage this vulnerability, which are the vulnerability related to this case. So what is interesting about this is that if we see the first one, this one is it's also known as proxy logon vulnerability. This vulnerability is can be exploited without authentication. So basically permit the attacker to send arbitrary HTTP request and authenticate as the exchange server. So essentially run instruction on the exchange server without the need to authenticate. And this vulnerability can be used as the initial step to further progress in the attack. So there is with this vulnerability, they can essentially escalate privilege, and then continue with using these other vulnerabilities. So just to give a more practical example, okay, this is let's see the big step for the first one, for the first vulnerability, which is the is an authentication bypass vulnerability. So as I said, it can be used to execute instruction on the servers without the need to authenticate. And one way how it be used was to steal mailbox contents from users. So the only things that the attacker needs to know to exploit this vulnerability basically was the email address of the person that you wanted to steal email from, and then you need to know the either IP address or the domain name of the exchange server. So let's say the webmail URL essentially. So with only this information, it was enough for the attacker to run, let's say, with a series of crafted HTTP requests. It was important. It was possible to discover the real the FQDN of the internal exchange server, and with that, then the attacker still with the HTTP post request was able essentially to steal the email content. So what are the response step in react to such situation. Well, I want to say that Microsoft released several instruction and several tools, indicator of compromise to properly assess and respond to the situation. So the first thing to do, first of all, is install the security patch, because this is the only full mitigation that it was possible. If it was not possible to patch right away, Microsoft releases some instruction for a partial mitigation. We could, let's say, implement some technical control to limit the attack surface. But again, the only full mitigation was to install the security patches. Now, also even installing the security patches, this does not mean that if the server were compromised before of installing it, we solve the issue. So another important thing is to if there was in your infrastructure vulnerable server to this, it's important to check if there is any kind of indicator for probing and exploitation attempt of this vulnerability. So, for example, so check the exchange logs for suspicious activity. So one way to spot it in this part was, for example, if there were any post requests in folders where usually they are not supposed to have a post request. And also scan for known web shell. Also Microsoft and other security researchers share a lot of indicators of compromising of hashes of files, malicious IPs, and really that we could use. And in general, apart from what is publicly available, also leverage anything that you have available within your organization. We could be private threat intel field, or maybe your own personnel, maybe a security, maybe system administrator or network administrator reach out to the SOC and say, hey, I noticed that there is something strange in this server. So that could be also useful in spotting if there was a compromise of the server. And so if you were lucky enough to not be affected by this, let's say patching and checking that, let's say, your infrastructure is clean was okay. But what happened if you find that there was something? So if you found some indicator, of course, then there are additional steps to take, and I'm not going into detail here, because this is also another long and another topic. But essentially, if it's compromise, so first thing is isolate the machine, and then continue with a post-compromise investigation to start an incident response plan. Okay, so this was the last slide. So just to recap what we have talked about. So what we can say is that today attacks are getting more and more sophisticated to be able to evade modern security measure. And this is specifically true for attacks that are targeting like companies or big organizations. So the let's say the entity that usually have a good security measure in place. So in this case, today, let's say a successful attack often requires the exploitation of multiple vulnerabilities. And it's important that a successful attack, where for successful attack I mean an attack that is not only compromise, let's say gain an initial foothold in the network, but let's say an attack as a final goal, which could be exfiltration of data, which could be deployment on a ransomware or something like that. But this is not happening from one moment to another. So usually the threat actor needs to develop their action over a long period of time. So there is an initial foothold, and then in the beginning, and of course they are trying to be to not be detected. So in this context, of course, zero-day exploit are very valuable for the threat actor, because they likely remains undetected long enough for the attacker to reach their final objective. But we still have some ways to defend against that. So we saw we saw earlier on, so that there are several things that we could do. So using innovative detection technologies. So I mentioned this technology like honeypots, but it's also network traffic analysis and this kind of thing. Also implement best practices can help the security blue teams to early spot the malicious activity. Okay, so this was the last slide. So I think we are also late, so maybe we can still have some few minutes for questions. Maybe over to you, Miguel.
Okay, thank you very much for your talk. It's been really interesting. You've given an excellent overview of the topic, so it's been really useful to me. So let's go. There is already one question that Mike asked a few minutes ago, and after we'll open a 10 that you can do like in the previous sessions. You can ask in the chat, and I will transmit all the questions to Gabriella. Right. The question that he asked was about honeypots. In the case of the honeypots, is it easy that actually the attacker realizes that he or she is dealing with a honeypot?
Okay.
If you want, I can take that.
Depends. Okay. Thank you.
So I think yes, it depends. There are different type of deception technique, and honeypot mainly are divided in low interaction honeypot, medium interaction honeypot, and high interaction honeypot. Low in general, high interaction honeypots are honeypots which are essentially exactly like an operation systems, so they're very difficult to be detected as a honeypot. However, the maintenance of such honeypots is very high. So from an infrastructure point of view, that requires a lot of work. However, that might give us let's say a better visibility of what the attacker is trying to do. Low and medium interaction honeypots, most of the time they will be able to detect let's say lower advanced threats, but still it's an early detection from a security monitoring point of view. I think in general, for any kind of deception technique, which can be honeypot, honeynet, also honeyfiles, the biggest challenge is it's make those deception techniques attractive, make them real, and that requires indeed a lot of work. It requires a workflow, a process to maintain those decoys. Let's say that those decoys that will act as a sensor in your network, active, valid, and attractive.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. We've got another question from Max, who asks if companies have any kind of formal or informal agreement to actually publish zero-day exploits, or if, on the contrary, they may try to exploit it on their own benefits, because some other companies are just a direct competence, and maybe they just prefer to hide that there is an exploit so that other companies may be damaged. How is the question basically is, how are the ethics in this respect?
I think you want to take that, Gabriel, or do you want me to comment on this?
No, okay, it's I can take it. So let's say that also in this case is not so black and white answer. So there is actually a big debate on whether or not the zero-day vulnerability should be made public, and what happened in the practice is that it depends. I mean, there is not no pre-agreement or any written rule on what to do with when you discover like a zero-day vulnerability. What happens is like the companies. That's why companies, for example, as the bug bounty programs, because to let's say involve the person that has discovered something to share with them. And so I don't know, maybe Amedeo, if you want to add something more on this respect, but it's not an easy one.
Yeah, indeed, I think you cover. I think what is in general 0 days, legally speaking, right? As an entity, you're not allowed to exploit 0 days to other organization. And hence, when you identify 0 day, that usually you should be reporting to the technology that it's essentially the technology responsible to fix or to provide a patch for that specific 0 days. So in that case, when you identify 0 day on Microsoft technologies, the best practice would be that you report this to Microsoft or to Facebook or to other organizations. Now, perhaps there are many other organizations and entities that are leveraging 0 day for financial benefit or profits, but essentially that's something that it's not control, and that shouldn't be the best practice, let's say.
Perfect. Yeah, and let's ask a last question. I think, well, when I was a student, one of the lecturers had the theory. Well, he actually said to us, never install the last version of the software. Let other take the risk. What do you think about this? I mean, should we have the last version of the software because it's going to be more secure? Or on the contrary, probably the last version of the contract of the software is more likely to contain zero-day threats that may create some kind of risk in our company. What is your personal view on this?
Okay, maybe I can take this. So personal view, always update when there is a security patches as soon as possible. Now, depending on what is the affected server, you also have to do a risk assessment if they can introduce, let's say, maybe a downtime in your operation or something like this. But generally speaking, patch as soon as possible when it's about security updates.
Perfect. Well, we can give it. Thank you very much for the talk and the answers to the questions. I think it's been really nice and at least of a very good value, at least to me, and I'm sure that for most of the students. So, well, let's present then the next presenter as well.
Okay, just one last thing, Miguel. If you want, I can share this presentation maybe with you by email if you want to